So you've come here to make an announcement. What is it?
Yeah, I'm going to be the next NFL commissioner. No, I am running for the Republican nomination for governor of the state of Colorado for 2018.
You start with a joke, but this is serious.
Yeah, this is serious. But again, you know, I'm not everything about me is completely serious. I mean, there's some lighthearted aspects to me too.
Why? Why are you running for governor?
One, this is the only home I've ever known. I mean, everything that's important to me is here in this state. My kids, my wife, I mean, every part of my life has occurred here. Whether it's going to public school here, getting my commission here, getting married here, burying my mom here, having my kids here, my district attorney job is here. I don't want to be anyplace else. And at the same time, I recognize that every single important issue that you guys report upon, that gets talked about in the papers and the water coolers, those are things that take place under my roof every single day. This state means something to me, and not just for now, but for the future, because I want my kids to inherit the kind of Colorado that I did, and I want them to be able to afford to stay here and want to stay here. And I think I can bring the kind of leadership to this office that it has been missing for some time now.
You almost ran for governor 2.5 years ago. Why now?
Well, it was, I think the first time it came up was like 2013-ish. And in part, if you'll remember, that came up at a time when the Aurora Theater Massacre trial was still in front of me. And because that horrific crime, that kind of blight on the community had occurred in between the time I'd won the Republican nomination and the general, it really felt to me like the public had in part cast votes for the person they wanted to bring justice to that case. And it didn't feel like, with only a limited amount of time in office and that case still hanging out there in the future, that it made sense for me to say, you know, I'm going to put my political ambition before what I thought was my duty. So I pursued my duty. I tried that case. I got the most justice I could get from it, and then we moved on.
Why are you announcing now? Why not 2 months ago? Why not 2 months in the future?
Well, the 2 months ago part is, look, I want to give my family as many holidays without the campaign looming over them as much as possible. Why not in the future? Listen, I'm not going to be the richest candidate in this race. In fact, if there's a spectrum of people who bring money or long political ties through family members to this campaign, I'm not that guy. I'm going to be on the other side of the spectrum, and that is the conservative grassroots candidate. And if you're the grassroots candidate, that's not just a word or a label to try to attach to you. It means you got to do something. It means you got to get out to the state of Colorado, and you earn your votes not by buying TV time or putting mailers in people's mailboxes or showing up on the internet. It's about handshakes. It's about doing this right here, having face-to-face conversations. Let people measure you in person and have conversations about what's important to them and how you think your leadership that you can bring to the office will make a difference.
So for people who don't know, who is George Brauchler?
I mean, I'm a Libra. Is that George Brauchler is a kid who grew up here in Lakewood. You know, I walked to school with my brother from the daycare that we went to because both my parents have worked as long as I can remember. We had a great middle-class upbringing with all the opportunities, obligations, and limitations that has attached to it. I just have never really wanted to leave the state to pursue any other sort of ambition. I am committed to the idea that public service matters, and I think I get that from my parents. I mean, my dad left banking to become a computer guy, a systems analyst for the federal government, and my mom, who grew up as a farm girl in Pennsylvania, the rolling hills of Pennsylvania, you know, she was told best thing you're ever going to be is either a farmer's wife or maybe a secretary. That just didn't fit my mom. And so ultimately, she moves out here with my dad from the East Coast. She gets a college degree, master's degree. In her 40s, gets a law degree. And all the time, she's working full-time as an investigator for the Office of Civil Rights. And I think that kind of service, whether I knew it or not at the time, growing up in our house, left an impression on me. And the idea that there is a role for government to play in making people's lives better and for standing up for the little guy. And I think that's sort of how I ended up here. Like, I never had any interest in being an attorney. I didn't want to follow in my mom's footsteps. I meant to be an armor officer. You know, I got an ROTC scholarship, took it to CU Boulder, the most military-friendly school in the region. And I thought I was going to drive tanks around. I mean, this was during Desert Storm. I thought that's how I was going to spend my career. And one thing led to another, and I tried the LSAT, got into law school. And while I was in law school, I thought, you know what, I want to try my hand at prosecution. So I took an internship down in Golden, and I think I found my passion. And that was the idea that there are laws that need to be followed. There's right, there's wrong, there's a huge gap in between, and in that gap is generally justice. We try to figure out how to get that for the most amount of people. So I don't know, and then of course, you know, my family. I had the opportunity to run for the U.S. Senate a couple of years ago after this case, and I got close. I thought about it, and you know, I got an ego like anybody else, and I can be talked into some things. But at the end of the day, the idea of leaving Colorado every week to go to a place thousands of miles from here, to not see my kids, to not see my wife, it didn't make much sense to me. So at the end of the day, we decided, nope, we're staying here. In this position, I think I can do great things for Colorado, for my neighbors, for your neighbors, and for the future.
What's the one quality that you bring that you believe makes you most qualified to be governor of this great state?
Leadership. Listen, I think what we've seen over the last 6 years is affability in management. And affability is not a substitute for leadership. I think I have proven from my time in office that I will stand up for the things that I believe in, for the things that I think are right, even in the face of opposition, whether it's opposition from my own party or from other powers that be. And I will spend political capital to do what I think is right. So that kind of commitment to doing the right thing and the leadership that it takes to do that, to make a difference, I think that's what I bring to the table. And it's not just as DA. I mean, look, I'm a colonel in the Army National Guard. I've spent decades in uniform serving my country and now serving my state. Here, across the country, in Iraq, I think when you spend a lifetime committing yourself to something bigger than yourself, I don't know what the word is to describe that other than service to others and sacrifice, but that's what I bring to the table.
Ken Salazar's decision not to run, how has that changed this race?
I think we'll see Ed Perlmutter jump into the race. I think that other than that, it really makes no difference at all.
How would you handicap the current list of potential governor candidates or candidates that have announced?
Handicap them in terms of the Republicans and the Democrats on each side?
Favorite to win? Where do you rank? Who's your greatest potential opposition, either on the Republican or the Democratic side? I mean, how do you handicap the race today?
With the known candidates that are in the race that are declared?
Yes.
Boy, I don't know. It's so early. I mean, listen, I like my chances because I know me, and I know the feedback that I get from total strangers in the supermarket who come up to me and say, thank you for what you did on this case or that case, and thank you for taking a stand. I like our chances, but listen, I'm not going to dismiss anybody on the Republican side. There are some good names in the race and some good names being talked about. There are people that bring a lot of money to the table that I don't bring to the table, but at the end of the day, I don't think Coloradans vote for the biggest bank account. I don't think they vote for the person who can buy the most TV time. I think they vote for the person who brings the strongest leadership and greatest commitment to Colorado values. Now, on the other side of the aisle, it kind of doesn't matter to me. I mean, everybody that's been talked about on that side is a big government Democrat. And by the way, good guys. I mean, I like the people that have been announced there. I like Johnson. I've met Ed a few times, Congressman Perlmutter. Those are decent guys. But their view of Colorado and their view of the role that government should play in our lives is just different than mine. They see a Colorado where government plays a much bigger role. I don't.
On that point, what do you believe Colorado voters want in their next governor?
I think they want leadership. I think they want commitment to Colorado's specific brand of values. And I think that's different. I mean, we're a different people, right? We're a state that is committed to liberty to the exclusion of ideology. And that's how you get a state that is so invested in the Second Amendment and the ability to own and possess firearms, concealed and otherwise, and yet a state that also says we believe in legalized recreational marijuana by a significant margin. This is a state that wants to be left alone by and large. This is a state that believes in neighbors, in community, and not what can government do for me. This is a state that believes in self-determination. Those are all things that I subscribe to. This is the area that I grew up in. This is the state that taught me what it means to be a citizen. And I bring that to the table.
Let's talk about history. Colorado has gone blue in the last 3 presidential elections.
Yeah.
Colorado has not elected a Republican governor since Bill Owens in 1998. How do you, a Republican candidate, win in a state that's been consistently blue for a while?
Let's go broader than that. It is more stark than that. If you go back 100 years, let's go back to 1918. There really has, that's the last time, other than Bill Owens, other than Governor Owens, that we've had a truly open governor's race that the Republicans have won. Now, Republicans have won against incumbents in office and beaten them, but in terms of a truly open seat, we've just had Governor Owens in the past century. That means something. That's a big deal. I'm not sure that's a reflection of Colorado's commitment to one party over the other or it being blue versus red. I think the dynamics of this state are ever changing. I think the dynamics of politics are ever changing. Some of it's a product of our campaign finance. Some of it's a product of, you know, professional politicians. Some of it's a product of social media and how the news has changed. Look, I think what I bring to the table is I'm a Republican and I am the conservative in this race. That is true. But those labels don't define me. I define me. I'm a George Brauchler, Colorado Republican, and that's someone that subscribes to the values of this state, not to some national Republican Party. We're different than those C-level, you know, Republicans that are elsewhere. I believe in the things that are important to Colorado.
One thing you hear often during elections is independents decide Colorado. How do you get the independent vote in this state?
Look, I think what independents want is what you and I want. And that is someone with the guts to stand up for what's right and for someone to stand up for something that they believe in. I think we've had enough of affability, wishy-washiness, just trying to remain popular at all costs. I think we've seen leadership from behind. I think we've seen a leadership model where as long as you're in the room when other people make the hard decisions, you get credit for it. I think all of Colorado, Republicans, Democrats, independents, I think they're all craving someone to stand up and say, let's move forward together and not just let the winds of change blow us around.
So you're a Republican. What's your position on Donald Trump?
In what way?
His presidency so far.
Well, look, he's our commander-in-chief. I think that, what are we, less than 100 days still? I think he's definitely done some things that are positive difference makers. I also think that he's done some things both personally and both spun by the media that are huge distractions to him moving forward on things that are matters of importance. But at the end of the day, this really isn't a Donald Trump issue. This is a federal government issue. Look, one of the other things that makes Colorado unique is we don't want the federal government coming in here and having a huge impact on our day-to-day life. We don't want bureaucrats thousands of miles from here showing up to tell us how we ought to be managing our affairs or living our lives. So if people are interested in that kind of separation, if they want a governor to stand up and say, listen, federal government, let us be Colorado. That's what we want to be. Then I'm the person that you want to put in that position. And whether it's Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, or anyone else you can name for the future, I will put the interests of Colorado before the interests of my party and before the interests of the federal government.
I guess where I was going there is in our last election, Mike Coffman, a Republican, distanced himself from Donald Trump, the candidate. Now you're running with President Trump. Have you considered creating distance there? Do you need to do that in order to win this state?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you know, as the federal government continues to play a larger role in the day-to-day lives of Coloradans, then all of a sudden we have to be more concerned about who we put in the Oval Office than we probably should be. You know our budget. A significant portion of that comes from the federal government. That means that they dictate how we spend money to better ourselves. That's a mistake. I think we need someone to stand up and say, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, whether it's Trump or anybody else, listen, there's a role for the federal government to play, and it is not in the day-to-day lives of Coloradans. Now, having said that, he is our commander-in-chief. He's due the same respect that we owe to anybody that fills that position. But that doesn't mean that we don't call him out when we disagree. It doesn't mean that we don't stand up and say, this isn't an issue for you, this is an issue for Coloradans, and we'll take it from here. And marijuana is a perfect example of that.
We're going to get to marijuana in a bit also, but I guess the deeper question here is, you saw what Mike Coffman did in distancing himself from Donald Trump. Can you win an election in 18 months in Colorado by supporting Donald Trump?
Well, what does that mean by supporting?
Saying you support what he's done, assuming no change in 18 months. Clearly, he's been polarizing.
Yeah.
And is that something that concerns you?
I guess I would be concerned by a voter who would say something that the President of the United States did out in Washington, D.C. or some other part of the country should have an impact on the decision about who we put under the gold dome here. I don't feel any commitment to do anybody else's bidding except for the state of Colorado. And that doesn't matter who's in the White House. If the issue here, though, is, look, what are the optics of being part of the same party? Donald Trump is not running for governor of the state of Colorado. I am. He's the President of the United States. He has an important role to play, and there are things that we do that require him to make some decisions. But by and large, what we ought to be focused on is how can Coloradans better and more often make decisions for themselves than relying upon the bureaucrats out in Washington, D.C.
Are you at all concerned of a potential blue wave midterm and running as a Republican?
No. No, and I'm not, because I think Colorado voters are smarter than that. I mean, we are just not a party fealty kind of state. Yes, party matters to some extent. I mean, listen, I'm a Republican for a reason. There are Democrats who are running for this office for a reason. There are probably independents who will figure out a way to declare at the last minute to be one or the other because they know that party matters for the purposes of running an election. But at the end of the day, the voters, man, I think voters are willing to vote for who they think is the best leader for Colorado, independent of whatever their partisan politics are. I believe that, and I think that's why you see the independents growing as a voting bloc in the state of Colorado more than any other party.
As the district attorney for the 18th Judicial District, what's been your defining moment?
Defining moment. I don't know that you can take a job this dynamic, this big, with such awesome responsibilities and equally awesome powers and distill it down into one defining moment. I think for people that don't know what we do on a day-to-day basis, they can look to the case that's gotten the most publicity, and that would be the Aurora Theater case. But I don't want to be defined by that case, and I don't want this office, which has 225 fabulously dedicated employees that do great work day to day that have nothing to do with the Aurora Theater case. I don't want them to be defined by it either. If we're going to be defined by something, let it be by how much justice we can bring to those victims. Let it be by how we've tried to tackle some of the burgeoning issues in our jurisdiction, like human trafficking, by creating a human trafficking unit, by creating a domestic violence unit, cold case unit to tackle the 200 unsolved murders that we have. Let it be defined by how much transparency we brought. We're the most transparent DA's office in the state of Colorado, by the fiscal, conservative, responsible approach we've taken not only to the budget, to my own salary. I don't know of another DA in the history of this state that went to the county commissioners and said, cut my pay to make me the lowest paid DA in the state. Now, those things individually aren't defining moments, but together, I think what they talk about is a commitment to service and a commitment to doing the right thing by the community that you serve. That's how we should be judged.
Looking back on the Aurora Theater case, you got a guilty verdict, but not a death sentence.
Right.
A victory. How do you look back on what you did in that case?
Look, I am a firm believer that our system generates justice because the system is just. Process matters. We're not Machiavellian. It's not the ends justify the means. That's some other country. That's not ours. I am invested in this system, and had that juror that sort of derailed the rest of deliberations for sincerely held beliefs, I don't hold that against them. Had they moved forward and they had voted to impose death, the sentence that I thought was justice, I would expect the community to embrace that sentence as a just outcome. Well, they didn't. And I'm not going to give scandal to the system by saying something other. I think that was justice because it went through our system. Now, if you ask me personally, do I think that guy deserves to die for what he did? I absolutely believe that to this day. But that outcome, that was justice.
Marijuana, an important issue for many voters in Colorado. Where do you stand, and will you defend the decision of Colorado voters if the federal government comes knocking?
Yeah, I'm going to defend the laws that are on our books and in the Constitution, especially the ones that are voted on directly by voters, just like this one was. Now, if you'd asked me back at the time it was on the ballot, do you support amending our state constitution to make marijuana part of it? I'd have said, no, let's not do that. Frankly, if we were going to legalize recreational marijuana, we should have done it statutorily to make it easier to try to figure out how to address some of the issues we've seen. But having said that, 55% of those who voted on that issue said they want it to be legal. Well, I embrace the rule of law, and I embrace the will of the voters in that, and I would stand up to a federal government that tried to visit its will on top of ours. Okay. But we're going to make this law work. Now, it doesn't right now, and anybody that tells you that this thing is working well and it's being well regulated and the tax money is the only thing to focus on, that is foolish. I'm going to protect families out there, including my own, from, I think, what are the dangers of this Wild West-like approach to marijuana regulation. We're going to fix this thing, but it's not going to be tomorrow. We need some leadership to stand up and try to get this done. Frankly, there's a bill out there right now that Representative Cole Wist, who's one of my representatives in my jurisdiction, has put forward. That's going to go a long way towards putting us in a position to bring some accountability and regulation to an otherwise pretty unregulated area of marijuana.
So as we sit here right now, others in the race for governor have more money in the bank. Will money decide this race, and can you win a money race with other announced candidates?
I think the answer to that question lies with things that we just saw happen in 2016. Darrell Glenn, I think, had $50 in his pocket when he won the assembly, and he had far less money than Senator Michael Bennet had. And yes, he lost, but my goodness, he came within just a couple few points of unseating an incumbent, super-funded senator. I think if money made a difference, we'd have seen Jeb Bush be the nominee of our party, and our party pretty firmly rejected Jeb. I don't think money is the difference maker here. I don't take it for granted. I think it's important to get your message out. But my route to success isn't to be the richest candidate in this race. It's to be the grassroots candidate that goes out and wins voters just like this, face to face, them measuring me up, me understanding the issues that are important to them.
To the death penalty, a lot of controversy during the last governor's election between you and Governor Hickenlooper over the death penalty. Nathan Dunlap, the Chuck E. Cheese murderer. If you're elected, will you send Dunlap to death row?
Yes. Yeah, I'm gonna breathe life back into that jury's verdict. And that's not because I say death is appropriate. That's because 12 people that his attorneys helped pick back in 1996 voted unanimously to sentence him to death. The guy had 17 years of post-conviction appellate review. The Supreme Court finally came back and said, there's nothing left for us here, go impose this sentence. And it was only because our governor took an affirmative stance to stand up and shrug that that didn't happen. So yes, I am going to put the force of law behind that verdict that that mass murderer earned 20 years ago.
If there's one thing you want voters to hear on the day you're announcing for governor, what is it?
The one thing I want them to hear, Colorado craves leadership. And I think I can bring that leadership to it. If you're looking for someone who has proven vested interest in things outside of his own self-interest on behalf of a bigger cause in his neighbors, I'm that guy. And I will do the best job possible for the state of Colorado. We're going to look back and we're going to be happy at the decisions we made in 2018.
What role do you think your military experience will play in this election?
Well, a couple things. One, training. I have received training in leadership by the best organization for such a thing on the planet Earth. And that's the United States Army. But it's not just the training. I mean, I have proven time and again that I am able to lead under positions of stress, high demand. That's why I've progressed through the ranks the way that I have. I am proud to have earned the rank of colonel. I think it also speaks to my commitment to do something that is bigger than me and that represents sacrifice. Listen, we have an all-volunteer military, National Guard too. And it is amazing to me that in a country as prosperous as ours, with the opportunities that we have, that you have young men and women who are willing to raise their right hand and say, I'm willing to give it all up in order to defend something on behalf of this state or this country. I'm willing to give it all up in order to do something bigger than me. That's impressive to me. I mean, I am proud to get to wear the same uniform as those heroes. I'm proud to get to call myself a member of the Armed Forces and the National Guard. I think that does make me different than a lot of the other candidates out there.
What hurdles do you foresee?
Oh, I think there are going to be those who want to say, oh, he's just the death penalty guy, he's a one-issue candidate. And, I mean, clearly that's not true. I mean, I'm happy to talk about all the issues that are out there. If there's one issue that if I'm a one-issue candidate, that issue is leadership. And that's something that I've demonstrated, whether it's in that case or in the performance of this biggest, most important DA's office in the state. I think what does get lost sometimes, and you probably know this, but others don't, is most of the time when I'm on the news or I'm giving quotes or talking about something, it's about something super serious, like crime, rape, robbery, murder, things involving child victims. It's very hard to show a greater sense of humor or a greater give in you. But I have
the real George Brauchler.
The real George Brauchler. And listen, the cases that get highlighted are the worst cases. They're the cases where we've had to fight the hardest against the worst conduct and some of the worst offenders out there. But listen, we file approximately 5,000 felony cases a year, and some of the great work that we do doesn't ever show up in the newspaper, doesn't ever show up on TV. I'm proud of the fact that we have taken steps to do things like create a Veterans Treatment Court so that we can try to keep those who have gone overseas in the service of their country and they've come back with something extra or come back with something less that has caused them to run afoul of the law, that we're figuring out a way to keep them out of prison and make them valuable members to society again. I am proud of the fact that we have a recovery court, that we have a mental health court. I'm proud of the fact that we have the best juvenile diversion program in the state of Colorado, and we continue to try to find ways to keep kids out of the system. That doesn't get ink. That doesn't get on TV. That's the bulk of what we do in trying to seek justice. I am invested in what is best for my neighbors, best for my community. And I don't think sometimes that comes out in just being the district attorney, but that's what I think I bring to the table. Leadership matters. I'm collaborative, but I'm also decisive. And I'm willing to stand up for the things that I believe in. I'm not sure you can say that about everybody in politics anymore.
So if you win, do you move your family into the governor's mansion?
No. No. Look, I love living in Parker. We lived in Douglas County over 20 years. My kids go to school there. I'm not going to get caught up in the trappings of the governor's office. Will we use it for something great, for community events or, fundraisers for noble causes? Sure. But I have no intention of moving into Denver.
Fair. I'm going to wrap it up, guys.